22 state attorney generals have sued the U.S. Education Secretary for siding with profit over schools' best interest. RT's Brigida Santos joins me now with the story. Brigida, what states are taking Betsy DeVos to the court? Let me preface it by saying, I don't know how many stories in the last 2 months we've done on Betsy DeVos, but she is like a magnet for really ugly stuff. And I'm just wondering which states had the courage to say, not on my watch. Talk to me about it.
Well, the lawsuit is being led by the Attorneys General of California and Massachusetts, with other AGs joining from the District of Columbia and 20 other states, including Colorado, Minnesota, Nevada, Virginia, New York, and more. The coalition is challenging a 2019 rule rewrite by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos that makes it almost impossible for students who have been defrauded by for-profit colleges to have their federal student loans canceled. The 2019 rule rolls back key Obama-era borrower defense to repayment protections that offered students relief from federal loans that were borrowed based on the fraudulent, misleading, or illegal claims of higher education institutions. Because students can no longer use violations of state consumer protection laws as a defense in their student loan forgiveness cases, predatory universities are now shielded from nearly all accountability.
Well, there's more to that story. I heard you talk about, Obama came forward with an idea for it, but you understand the backstory on that. The backstory is that you used to be able to use bankruptcy court. If you were working, you were trying to pay it off, and you just couldn't pay it off, you had some protection of bankruptcy court. Well, Obama, during his years as a senator, voted against that and provided bankruptcy protection that closed the door for students to be able to have protection from these, from being dogged every day of their life to have this thing paid back. So there's a lot more to this story than this surface. What scams have for-profit colleges engaged in? In other words, they engage in scams. Then the student comes out sometimes without a degree at all, and they still have to pay back this loan. That's the typical kind of story, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's so many of these scams, but this lawsuit particularly highlights some of the scams by proprietary universities, including enrolling students in professional certification programs that actually lack accreditation that's needed for students to obtain licenses in their profession when they're done with school, while failing to disclose that information to students. It also outlines how the for-profit school industry is prone to abusing its access to taxpayer-funded Title IV aid, which these proprietary colleges heavily rely on in order to generate money. One reason the Obama administration implemented the 2015 rule after voting against it previously was because years of investigations exposed how for-profit schools, including ITT Tech, DeVry, Corinthian colleges, and so on, have long defrauded students out of that money.
Yeah, so you see these advertisements. Can you draw the stick figure? If you're going to be the next Renoir. You probably want to come to our college, and we're going to get you this degree. And after we get you this degree, we're going to get you a job, and you're going to be making a ton of money. That was always the come on and become a nurse, come on and become a doctor's assistant, become a paralegal. And most of them were absolute scams. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, they had to pay those loans back. Talk about the victims of predatory colleges and universities. How is this new law really going to impact them?
Sure. Proprietary colleges target their marketing to veterans, the unemployed, and people from low-income and minority communities. They claim to offer accessible and career-focused degree and certificate programs to people who might not have the opportunity to enter traditional colleges, which have gotten only more expensive every year. Students choose these schools because they're eager to learn new skills so they can successfully join the workforce and achieve the American dream. They're really trying here. But if the government department that's tasked with helping students allows private companies to continue to defraud them with impunity, society is absolutely going to suffer as a whole. Okay,
so what happens is the Justice Department doesn't do their job. They don't prosecute for fraud. They should prosecute for fraud. They don't do what they're supposed to do. And so the student gets sucked into it. DOJ's with the federal government, right? So then student comes through the program and the student says, look, I can't pay this loan. And the federal government says, you know what? You're going to be responsible anyway. It's a terrible, terrible story for the student from beginning to end. Brigida, thank you for joining me, okay?
Thanks, Mike.
Deutsche Bank investors are suing the company and CEO for their financial ties to the late Jeffrey Epstein. And just days ago, the case was assigned to a judge who his family ended up being murdered by. But you know what? It has nothing to do with the story.
Right.
Epstein has nothing to do with the story. Deutsche Bank has nothing to do with the story. But all of a sudden, it's this immediate magnet. This has got to be connected. We got to have a good story for the nightly news. This guy's a nutcase.
Right.
Okay, he's a nutcase.
And he's a dead one.
He's a dead nutcase. So to talk about it, but to me, it's so bothersome when you see the media always trying to corner a story where it doesn't belong. This is one of those situations.
You're exactly right. I think it boils down to clickbait.
Yeah.
Anything to do with Epstein draws people's attention.
Yeah.
They want to know anything about him and what's connected to it because it's such a rabbit hole of who did he know? Did he blackmail people? This, that, and the other. So if they can take a high-profile case like this, which had a loose connection, if you will, a tenuous connection to the Epstein case, I feel like that's why the media went ahead and played it up.
But doesn't that bother you? Come from 25 years as an anchor.
Yes.
I mean, it's just to me, it's incensing that nobody sits back and says, look, let me call balls and strikes here. This doesn't have to do with Epstein. It has to do with a lawyer who was a nut job.
Right. He was all over social media, claimed to be a Trump supporter, self-proclaimed anti-feminist who was supporting men's causes. And in fact, authorities are now reporting that when they searched his car, they found the name and picture of another woman judge. So they don't know if she was a potential target as well. But it seemed like this guy was a loose cannon, walked up to this judge's door, Esther Salas. Her son, 20-year-old son, answered the door. Her husband was right behind him. Both were shot. The son died. He, the attorney, was dressed in a FedEx uniform. He took off and then later killed himself, shot himself in the head, and his name was Roy Den Hollander. And so, basically the investigation is zeroed in on him. They don't think there's any connection to Epstein, but initially the reports were, hey, this judge, Esther Salas, had been assigned the lawsuit, this ongoing lawsuit against Deutsche Bank just 2 weeks before she was shot, and that lawsuit has to do with investors going after the bank for not having proper standards and allowing, basically money laundering to happen.
Deutsche Bank needs to be sued. Okay?
Yes, I agree.
Deutsche Bank, there was this whole...
It's enabling these predators.
But here's the point. This guy didn't go shoot anybody because of Deutsche Bank or Epstein. Look, my memory, as I looked at the background of this guy, he was a big Trumpster. Hated women. He must have didn't he have another picture of another female judge that he was going to shoot?
That's exactly right. Found it in his car.
Okay. So we've got this character that just isn't wired right. And he's the same guy, I think, that sued CNN and MSNBC for their fake news. Granted, it is a lot of fake news, but the chances of him winning in a lawsuit was almost... It's inconceivable. So here's this complicated character, and rather than the media stepping up and reporting the news, they come up with their narrative.
No, you're exactly right. And it's irresponsible reporting. And it goes to show when you hear stories like that, they haven't done the vetting. They are trying to do what I call clickbait, basically get as many viewers and eyes and, because that's how they make their money. If people are watching, if they can say we've got so many people watching or so many people following us online, then they can charge X amount for their advertisers. And you can tell a lot by the different news organizations of who's doing that. Are they just running with any sort of claim that's half-heartedly investigated just so they can get people talking about it? And it's not credible journalism. When you have real stories that should be investigated.
When did you start as an anchor in the news?
Goodness, it was like in the mid-'90s. I feel like I should mumble that.
Yeah. Okay, so we had 24-hour news around, but when we have 24 hours of news created what we're talking about here.
Well, I watched the transition.
First out, how do you get out first? What's your narrative?
Yeah, and that's the transition that I watched. I tell the story to people, when I graduated college and started my first television job in 1996, it was cut your hair short, don't wear no cleavage, no fitted clothing, no dangly earrings. You've got to be professional. You got to walk, talk, and act like a professional, like a man in a lot of ways. By the time I left that particular position, I still continued to report, but that Fox News business model of hot chicks in short skirts and fitted clothes was the model. And I was told, you got to wear fitted clothes. We don't want facts in stories. And I'm not making that up. They wanted all person on the street reaction as opposed to
like this.
Taking the time to dig in because it's a dying news model, your average everyday nightly news. And so they just want people to watch. And if they can feed you what you already believe, or if they can hit these sensational little segments, with a hot chick telling it to you, or a handsome a handsome man for that matter. But what I'm saying is, it's icing on the cake as opposed to digging into dinner and telling people what they need to know.
They only corrected this. They got back on track on this story only after being shamed. That's the only thing that saved them here.
No, you're exactly right. And that's why it's so important for people to be educated viewers. And maybe that's a pie in the sky dream, but I think people have to have a little bit of responsibility on themselves to realize news is a business for most of these outlets. And they're going to sell you whatever they can to keep you coming back for more. And if that includes misjuice and misconceptions, they have no problem with that.
Molly Barrows, thank you for joining me, okay?
Thanks, Pat.